Why does no one in my family live past 50? My mom turned 49 last week, and my grandmother Delilah immediately moved her into the transition suite on the third floor of our family's mansion. Your mother needs peace and comfort for her final year, Delilah said, looking at her wall of photographs. Every family member for 4 generations was up there, and every single one had died at exactly 50. Except Delilah. I'll help her prepare, just like I helped the others. I'd grown up watching aunts and uncles die exactly on their 50th birthdays. They'd go to sleep the night before and never wake up, leaving behind farewell letters they'd written in their final days. Everyone said it was the family curse, something in our genetics, a ticking time bomb in our DNA. Why didn't you die at 50? I asked Delilah for the 100th time. I don't know, she said, and she seemed genuinely puzzled by it. I waited for death and it never came. Maybe I was spared so I could guide the rest of you through the transition. She was 78 and the only person in our bloodline to survive past their 50th birthday. This time was different though. This time it was my mom. And when Delilah left the room, Mom grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. I'm not ready, she whispered. I want to see you get married and have kids. Maybe you'll be like Delilah, I said. Maybe you won't die. No one else has ever lived past 50, she said, except Estelle. But look what happened to her. Great Aunt Estelle had somehow made it to 51, and everyone thought she'd broken the curse. But her daughter died suddenly 2 days later, and Estelle died the day after that. Delilah said the curse had taken them both because Estelle had cheated death and disrupted the natural order. I started researching our family history trying to understand this curse, but I couldn't find any deaths at 50 before Delilah's generation. Her own parents had lived into their 70s. The pattern only started with Delilah's husband, who died on his 50th birthday right after Delilah inherited the family estate. Mom, what exactly happens when people turn 50? I asked. They just die, she said. They go to sleep and don't wake up. Delilah says it's peaceful. But how does she know? I asked. She's been with each of them at the end, Mom said. She's the only one strong enough to watch it happen. I snuck into Delilah's study one night to read the farewell letters she kept filed away. They were all in different handwriting, but something felt off. Every letter mentioned feeling drowsy in their final days. Every letter thanked Delilah for her comfort and care. While looking through old family records, I found something strange. My mom's sister Grace was listed as dying at 50, but the death certificate was weird. No cause of death, no hospital, just Delilah's signature as witness. I searched online and found a Grace Calgary living in Oregon, age 58. I called the number I found. Is this Grace Calgary? There was a long pause. Who's asking? I'm your niece, I said. Everyone thinks you're dead. Good, she said. Let them. How did you survive the curse? I begged. I left the night before my birthday, she said. Started getting sick a month before, exhausted and confused. It went away as soon as I left the house. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked. I tried to warn Estelle, she said. Her daughter overheard and started asking questions. She was snooping in Delilah's room the day before she died. I went to check on Mom in the transition suite. She was getting thinner and paler every day, and Delilah had started giving her special herbal drinks to ease her transition. I'm so tired all the time, Mom said. But Delilah says that's normal. The body knows when its time is coming. While they were downstairs, I searched the transition suite and found a locked cabinet in the closet. Inside were medical supplies, syringes, vials of clear liquid, and a notebook tracking dosages for each family member. The latest entry was about my mom. Building tolerance. Increase gradually. I photographed everything and went to the police, but they said suspicious deaths from 50 years ago couldn't be investigated without bodies. They promised to look into it but needed more evidence. I tried to convince Mom to leave, but she was terrified. What if the curse follows me? What if it takes you instead like it took Estelle's daughter? Mom, I don't think it's a curse, I said. Then why does everyone die? She asked, and I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound insane. I took a sample of Mom's herbal drink to get tested, but the lab said it would take weeks. Meanwhile, Mom was getting weaker, more accepting of her fate. She'd started writing her farewell letter with Delilah's help. 2 weeks before Mom's birthday, I broke into Delilah's bedroom while she was out. I found more photos dating back decades. Every person who died at 50 had the same glassy expression in their final photos. I found insurance documents. Delilah was the beneficiary for every family member who'd died. Millions of dollars over the decades. Then I found the most damning thing. A medical textbook on poisons and substances that mimic natural death. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly put everything back, but Delilah was already standing in the doorway. You're just like Estelle's daughter, she said, taking a syringe out of her pocket. Too curious for your own good. My legs want to run, but I make them stay still. I look at the syringe in her hand and then back at her face. I force my voice to sound normal and a little embarrassed. I tell her I was looking for extra blankets for Mom because she mentioned being cold earlier, and I got turned around in the hallway. The lie sounds weak even to me, but I keep talking. I say I know the linen closet is on the 2nd floor, but I thought maybe there was storage up here too. Delilah watches me while I talk. Her hand stays steady with that syringe visible. I can see her thinking about whether to believe me. The silence stretches out for what feels like forever. Finally, she slides the syringe back into her pocket. She tells me the medical supplies are just comfort care items for Mom. She says hospice patients need various medications for pain and anxiety. Her voice is calm, like she's explaining something obvious to a child. I nod along with everything she says. My phone is recording audio in my jacket pocket, and I pray the microphone is picking this up. Delilah relaxes a little bit. She warns me that snooping around causes stress for everyone. She says Mom especially needs peace right now. I apologize quickly. I use the exact same words Delilah always uses when she talks about Mom's final year. I say I just want to help Mom through her transition and make sure she's comfortable. Delilah studies my face for another long moment. Then she seems satisfied that I'm falling back in line with the family story. She tells me it's late and I should go home to get some rest. She moves to stand between me and her study desk as she walks me toward the bedroom door. I mention that I'd like to check on Mom one more time before I leave. Delilah hesitates. I can see her debating whether to let me. Finally, she agrees, but says she'll come with me. We walk down the hallway together toward the transition suite. My mind is already racing ahead to what I need to do next. I have photos of everything in that study. I have audio recording of her explaining away the medical supplies. I need to get this evidence to someone who will actually help. The police didn't take me seriously before, but maybe with this new proof they'll listen. We reach Mom's room and Delilah opens the door quietly. Mom is sleeping so deeply she doesn't move when we come in. Her breathing is slow and heavy. Her face looks pale against the white pillows. I notice the empty glass on her nightstand where Delilah's herbal drink was. Mom's hands are limp at her sides. The way she looks reminds me exactly of those final photos I saw in Delilah's study. That same glassy expression on everyone right before they died. I walk over to Mom's bed and pretend to adjust her blanket. I pull it up higher around her shoulders. While I'm doing this, I take out my phone like I'm checking the time. I snap a few quick photos of Mom's face and the empty glass and the room. Delilah watches me the whole time. Her expression is hard to read. I can't tell if she's suspicious or just monitoring Mom's condition. I smooth the blanket one more time and tell Mom quietly that I'll see her tomorrow. She doesn't respond at all. Delilah walks me downstairs to the front door. She reminds me again that Mom needs rest and too many visits tire her out. I promise to call before coming by next time. The moment I get to my car, I grab my phone with shaking hands. I can barely hold it steady enough to find Grace's number. She answers on the second ring. I tell her everything as fast as I can. The medical supplies in the locked cabinet, the notebook tracking dosages, the insurance documents showing Delilah as beneficiary for millions of dollars, the poison textbook, the confrontation where Delilah had a syringe. Grace listens without interrupting. When I finish, she's quiet for a second. Then she confirms everything I suspected. She says she started feeling sick about a month before her 50th birthday. Exhausted all the time. Confused and foggy. The symptoms went away within days of leaving the mansion. After a week away from Delilah's care, her head cleared up completely. She tells me I need to get Mom out of that house as soon as possible. I explain that Mom is terrified to leave because of what happened to Estelle and her daughter. Grace says that's exactly what Delilah wants. Keep everyone scared so they stay put and accept their fate. We talk about options, but nothing seems safe enough or fast enough. Mom's birthday is only 2 weeks away. I drive to an all-night coffee shop and park in their lot. It's 3 in the morning, but I'm too wired to sleep. I pull up a notes app on my phone and start mapping out the mansion. I draw every entrance I can remember. The front door, the kitchen door, the side entrance by the garden, the delivery entrance in back. I mark where I've seen security cameras over the years. There's one covering the front gate, one at the main entrance. I think there might be one in the garage, but I'm not sure. Then I write down the staff schedule based on months of watching the household routine. The housekeeper comes on Mondays and Thursdays from 9 to 3. The groundskeeper is there Wednesdays doing yard work. Delilah goes to her book club every Tuesday afternoon and she's usually gone for 2 or 3 hours. Those are the small windows when I might be able to get to Mom without Delilah hovering over every interaction. I need to use these times to talk to Mom, to show her the evidence, to convince her that leaving is the only way to survive. When the electronics store opens at 9, I'm waiting in the parking lot. I go inside and find the security camera section. A sales guy asks if he can help, and I tell him I need a small camera that's easy to hide. He shows me one designed to look like a phone charger. It's perfect. You plug it into an outlet and it records to a memory card. He demonstrates how to set it up and access the feed through an app on my phone. I practice positioning it at different angles to see what it captures. The camera has a wide lens that can cover most of a room if you place it right. I buy it along with a high-capacity memory card. In the parking lot, I test it again to make sure I understand all the settings. If I can record Delilah actually giving Mom those poison drinks or injections, that might be the concrete proof I need. Something that shows exactly what she's doing. Something that can't be explained away as family drama or misunderstanding. I find the police department's website on my phone and locate the detective division email address. I forward all the photos from Delilah's study. The medical supplies, the dosage notebook, the insurance policies, the poison textbook. I write a detailed email explaining the situation. I include the timeline. I emphasize that Mom's 50th birthday is in 2 weeks. I hit send and immediately get an automated response. The message says they're experiencing high case volumes. Response time is 5 to 7 business days. I want to throw my phone across the parking lot. Mom doesn't have 7 days to wait for someone to maybe look at an email. She doesn't even have 7 days total. But I force myself to stay calm and think about what else I can control. I need to keep building evidence. I need to document everything. I need to be ready to act when the time comes. I open the insurance document photos on my phone and zoom in to read them more carefully. The amounts are staggering. $50,000 after Uncle James died, $75,000 after Aunt Patricia, $100,000 after my grandfather. The policies go back decades. I add up rough numbers in my head and it comes to several $1,000,000 over the years. Every single policy lists Delilah as the beneficiary. Every death certificate has her signature as the witness. She was there for each one. She watched them die and signed the paperwork and collected the money. The pattern is so clear it should be impossible to ignore. But apparently everyone has ignored it for years because no one questioned the family curse story. No one thought to investigate because Delilah was the respected family matriarch who took care of everyone so devotedly during their final days. That afternoon, I returned to the mansion with the hidden camera in my purse. I text Delilah that I'm coming by and she responds that Mom is awake but needs to keep the visit short. When I get to Mom's room, she's sitting up in bed. She looks groggy and pale, but at least her eyes are open. I tell her I've been worried about her. I say I've been researching our family history and some things don't add up. I'm trying to gauge how much I can say without scaring her into telling Delilah everything. Mom squeezes my hand weakly. She says she's accepted her fate. She tells me that fighting the curse only makes things worse. She mentions Estelle and how trying to cheat death got both her and her daughter killed. I have to bite my tongue hard to keep from screaming. I want to tell her there is no curse. I want to show her all the evidence. But I know if I push too hard right now, she'll panic and tell Delilah and then I'll lose all access. So instead, I just hold her hand and tell her I love her. I promise her we'll figure this out together. She smiles sadly like she thinks I'm in denial about what's coming. Before I leave, I plug the hidden camera into an outlet near her nightstand. It looks exactly like a regular phone charger. Mom doesn't even glance at it. I leave Mom's room and walk quickly down the stairs, my legs shaking from the adrenaline of plugging in that camera right under Delilah's nose. I get to my car and sit in the driver's seat for a minute, hands gripping the steering wheel while I try to calm down enough to think clearly. I pull out my phone and search for private medical labs that do toxicology testing, scrolling through results until I find one that advertises fast turnaround times and 24-hour service. I dial the number and a woman answers on the second ring, her voice professional and slightly tired. I explain that I need to test a drink sample and some vials for unknown substances, trying to sound calm and reasonable instead of like someone in the middle of a family emergency. She starts asking questions about chain of custody and whether this is for legal purposes, and I realize this is way more complicated than just dropping off a sample at a lab. She tells me about proper collection procedures, storage requirements, and documentation that needs to be maintained if I want the results to be useful in any official capacity. I'm writing notes on the back of a receipt I found in my console, trying to keep up with all her instructions about sealed containers and temperature control and witness signatures. She says they can do a rush analysis, but it will cost extra. And when she quotes the price, I do quick math in my head and realize this will max out my credit card. I tell her that's fine and arrange to bring everything in tomorrow morning at 8, hanging up. And sitting in the dark parking lot feeling like I'm drowning in details and procedures when all I want is someone to just test the damn poison and tell me what Delilah is using to kill people. I drive to a coffee shop that's still open and order something I don't really want, then sit at a corner table with my laptop and start searching for information about elder abuse laws in our state. I spend over an hour reading through dry legal language about mandatory reporting requirements, discovering that healthcare workers are legally required to report suspected abuse to authorities. If I can get one of the nurses or aides who visit the house to actually see what's happening, they might be obligated to file a report that would carry more weight than my accusations as a family member. The problem is that Delilah carefully controls who has access to Mom and for how long, always hovering nearby and managing every interaction. I read about what constitutes evidence of abuse and what kind of documentation is needed, taking screenshots of relevant sections to reference later. I find the contact information for Adult Protective Services and stare at it for a while, knowing I need to call but also knowing it probably won't help fast enough. I dial the number anyway, and work my way through an automated phone tree that offers me options for reporting abuse, getting information about services, and speaking to a representative. I press buttons and wait through hold music until finally a real person picks up and asks how she can help me. I explain the situation as clearly as I can, telling her about Mom being kept in the transition suite, the medications with no proper prescriptions, the pattern of family deaths, and the evidence I've been gathering. The intake worker is polite, but I can hear the hesitation in her voice as she explains that they need to prioritize cases with immediate danger and that family disputes over end-of-life care are complicated. She takes down my information and Mom's information, asking questions about Mom's mental capacity and whether there's an immediate threat to her safety. I tell her yes, there's an immediate threat because Mom's 50th birthday is in less than 2 weeks, but I can tell she thinks I'm overreacting or caught up in family drama. She says someone will follow up within a week to assess the situation, and I want to scream that Mom doesn't have a week to wait for someone to maybe schedule a visit. I thank her and hang up, adding this to my mental list of useless bureaucratic delays while Mom gets weaker every single day. I go back to the mansion that evening and let myself in with my key, heading straight up to the 3rd floor to check on Mom. When I get to her room, I notice immediately that there are new locks on the cabinet where Delilah keeps the medical supplies, small combination locks that weren't there this morning. Delilah is sitting in the chair by Mom's bed and she looks up when I enter, her expression pleasant but with something hard underneath. She tells me that mom needs more rest now and that too many visitors are exhausting her, speaking in that calm, reasonable tone that makes me want to shake her until she admits what she's really doing. I ask if I can just sit with mom for a little while, and Delilah checks her watch, then says I can stay for 20 minutes but mom shouldn't be disturbed or agitated. I sit on the edge of mom's bed and take her hand, which feels cold and limp in mine. Mom's eyes are closed and her breathing is shallow, and she doesn't wake up even when I squeeze her fingers gently. Delilah watches me the whole time from her chair, and I'm hyper-aware of every move I make. When Delilah gets up to adjust mom's blankets, I quickly reach over to the nightstand and make sure the phone charger camera is still plugged in and positioned correctly, my heart racing as I check that the angle captures the bed and the door. Delilah turns back around and I'm already pulling my hand away, pretending I was just moving mom's water glass. She tells me my time is up and I should let mom rest, walking me to the door like she's escorting me out. I leave feeling like I'm abandoning mom in enemy territory, but at least now I have that camera recording everything that happens in that room. The next morning, I wake up early and stop at a drugstore to buy a bottle of electrolyte drink that looks almost identical to the herbal mixture Delilah has been giving mom. I pour some out and compare the color and consistency, adding a little water until it matches perfectly. I put the bottle in my bag along with a clean sample container and drive to the mansion, getting there before Delilah usually starts her morning routine with mom. I let myself in and go upstairs, finding mom still asleep and the room empty. I can hear Delilah moving around downstairs, probably making breakfast or getting her own coffee. I move quickly to the nightstand where Delilah keeps the current batch of herbal drink in a glass bottle, my hands shaking so badly I almost knock it over. I unscrew the cap and carefully pour the mixture into my sample container, watching the thick brownish liquid flow out and trying not to think about how much of this mom has already consumed. I seal the sample container and shove it in my bag, then pour the electrolyte drink into the glass bottle and screw the cap back on. I'm wiping up a few drops I spilled when I hear footsteps on the stairs, and I barely have time to shove the drugstore bottle into my bag and step away from the nightstand before Delilah walks in. She looks at me with raised eyebrows and asks what I'm doing here so early, and I tell her I couldn't sleep and wanted to check on mom before work. She accepts this and moves to mom's bedside, and I make myself leave before she can get suspicious about why I'm lingering. That afternoon, I come back to visit, and mom seems more alert than she has in days, her eyes actually focusing on my face when I talk to her. She asks me questions about my life and what I've been doing, and she actually remembers my answers when I reference them later in the conversation. I'm so relieved I could cry, seeing her personality come back even just a little bit. Delilah comes in to check on us, and she notices immediately that something is different, her eyes narrowing as she watches mom track our conversation and respond appropriately. She makes a comment about how interesting it is that mom seems more energetic today, then adds that the herbs must need a stronger concentration, since mom is building up tolerance to the current dose. The casual way she discusses drugging her own daughter makes my stomach turn, but I force myself to smile and nod like I believe she's just trying to help with comfort care. Delilah leaves to go prepare a fresh batch, and I sit with mom, holding her hand and trying to memorize this moment of lucidity before the drugs pull her back under. That night, I sit in my car outside the mansion and pull up the hidden camera feed on my phone, scrolling back through the footage from the afternoon and evening. At first, it's just mom sleeping and Delilah coming in periodically to check on her, nothing unusual or suspicious. Then around 11 at night, I see Delilah enter the room with something small in her hand, and I zoom in as much as the app allows. She approaches mom's bedside and I can see it's a syringe, small and filled with clear liquid. The angle isn't perfect because the camera is positioned on the nightstand, but the footage clearly shows Delilah injecting something into mom's IV line while mom sleeps. She does it quickly and efficiently, like she's done this 1,000 times before, then disposes of the syringe in her pocket and leaves the room. I watch it 3 more times to make sure I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing, then I save the video file to my phone, and immediately upload copies to my email, a cloud storage service, and a USB drive I keep in my glove box. This might be the most important evidence I'll ever capture. Proof that Delilah is actively administering substances to mom without her knowledge or consent. The next morning, I have an appointment with a lawyer who specializes in elder law, someone I found through an online search of attorneys who handle guardianship cases. I bring my laptop with some of the photos and videos I've collected, and I explain the situation while he takes notes on a legal pad. I ask about emergency guardianship to get mom away from Delilah, and he listens carefully, but his expression tells me this isn't going to be as simple as I hoped. He explains that guardianship cases are complex and slow, especially when the alleged abuser is also a family member with decades of caregiving history and no prior complaints. Courts are reluctant to remove someone from their home and primary caregiver without substantial evidence and due process, which can take months. He suggests I focus on getting law enforcement involved first, since criminal charges would give me more immediate options for protecting mom through restraining orders or emergency removal. He gives me some paperwork about filing for guardianship anyway, just to start the process, but he's honest that it won't happen fast enough to help mom before her birthday. Before I leave, he writes down a name on his business card, telling me I should talk to Zachary Corbett, who is an estate attorney that has worked with our family for years. He says Corbett might have information about the insurance policies and financial arrangements that could be relevant to my case. I call Corbett's office from the parking lot, and his secretary puts me through after I explain I'm Delilah's granddaughter and need to discuss some estate matters. Corbett agrees to see me that afternoon, and I drive across town to his office, which is in one of those old buildings with dark wood paneling and expensive furniture. When I'm shown into his office, Corbett is polite but distant, gesturing for me to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. I start to explain my concerns about the insurance policies and the pattern of deaths, and his expression goes from professional to cold. He tells me that all the estate planning was done properly, and that family members often get upset about end-of-life decisions when emotions are running high. He says everything was reviewed by multiple attorneys and executed according to legal standards, and he implies I'm being dramatic and looking for problems where none exist. He suggests I focus on supporting Mom through her transition, rather than making accusations against Delilah, who has been nothing but devoted to her family for decades. I realize as he's talking that Delilah has probably prepared him for this conversation, maybe even warned him that I might come asking questions. He's protecting his client and shutting down my inquiries before I can get any real information from him. I thank him for his time and leave, adding him to my mental list of people who are either complicit or willfully blind to what's happening. I drive to the private lab and park in their small lot, grabbing my bag with the sample containers and heading inside. The reception area is clean and clinical, and I give my name to the person at the desk who directs me to a small consultation room. A woman in a lab coat comes in and introduces herself as Judith Berg, and she sits down across from me to discuss the testing process. She explains the limitations of testing without proper chain of custody and legal documentation, telling me that she can analyze the substances and tell me what they are, but the results might not be admissible in court if the collection process isn't documented correctly. She asks me detailed questions about how I obtained the samples and whether anyone witnessed the collection, and I have to admit that I did it alone without any official procedures. She nods like she expected this and says she understands, and that she can still run the analysis to tell me what I'm dealing with, even if it can't be used as legal evidence. I tell her that's fine, that I just need to know what Delilah is using, so I can figure out how to stop her. Judith takes the sample containers and labels them carefully, then promises to rush the analysis and call me with preliminary results within 48 hours. She gives me a receipt and some paperwork about the testing procedures, and I leave feeling like I'm finally making some kind of progress, even if it's slower than I need it to be. I drive back to the mansion that afternoon with a small audio recorder I bought at an electronics store, the kind designed to look like a regular USB charger. I park down the street and walk up to the house, checking that Delilah's car is still in the driveway before I let myself in through the side entrance. Mom is sleeping when I get to her room on the 3rd floor, her breathing shallow and her face pale against the white pillows. I move quickly to the wall where a framed photo of our family hangs near her bed, carefully lifting it off its hook and positioning the recorder behind it before hanging it back up. The device is small enough that it disappears completely behind the frame, and I test the angle to make sure it will pick up voices from anywhere in the room. I turn it on and check my phone to confirm it's recording, then adjust Mom's blanket and leave before Delilah comes back from whatever errand took her out of the house. Every piece of evidence I collect feels important, but also not enough on its own, like I'm building a puzzle where I need every single piece before anyone will believe what the picture shows. I'm scared I'm running out of time to gather everything I need before Mom's birthday arrives, and Delilah makes her final move. The next morning, I get a text from Delilah asking me to come by the house because there's someone she wants me to meet. I drive over, worried this is some kind of trap. But when I arrive, I find Delilah in the main sitting room with a woman in scrubs who has a professional medical bag sitting next to her chair. Delilah introduces her as Mallory Wood and explains she's a hospice nurse who will be helping with Mom's care during her final weeks. Mallory stands up to shake my hand, and she seems kind and competent, the type of person you'd actually want taking care of someone you love. She has paperwork spread out on the coffee table, and she's reviewing medication schedules and care protocols with Delilah, asking questions about Mom's symptoms and daily routine. I try to look at the documents while they're talking, but I can't see any logo or official letterhead from a recognized hospice organization. Delilah explains that Mallory comes highly recommended and has experience with end-of-life care in private home settings, and Mallory nods along while making notes in a leather binder. I ask if I can talk to Mallory privately for a minute, but Delilah immediately suggests we all go upstairs together to check on Mom so Mallory can do her initial assessment. The three of us walk up to the transition suite, and I watch Mallory examine Mom with gentle efficiency, checking her vital signs and asking her simple questions that Mom answers in a drowsy, confused way. Delilah stays in the room the entire time, standing near the door and offering explanations about Mom's medication schedule and special dietary needs. Everything Delilah says sounds caring and reasonable, but I'm suspicious of every single word because I know what's really happening here. I wait near the stairs after the assessment, hoping to catch Mallory alone, and I finally get my chance when Delilah goes downstairs to answer the doorbell. I follow Mallory into the hallway and ask her directly about the medications Mom is taking, and whether she's actually seen the prescriptions from a real doctor. Mallory stops walking and turns to face me, and I can see her thinking carefully about how to answer. She admits the documentation seems a bit unusual compared to what she normally works with, but she explains that everything has been presented to her as approved by Mom's physician, and that families often handle end-of-life care in private ways that don't follow standard hospital protocols. I watch her face while she talks, and I can see doubt in her eyes even as she defends the situation, like she's trying to convince herself as much as me. I want to tell her everything I've discovered, but I'm scared she'll just report back to Delilah. So instead, I ask if she'd be willing to review the actual medication vials and dosages to make sure they match what a doctor would prescribe. She hesitates again and says she'll take a closer look at the documentation, and I wonder if I might be able to turn her into an ally if I can show her the evidence I've been collecting without putting Mom in more danger. My phone buzzes with a text from Grace while I'm driving home, and I pull over to look at the photos she sent me. They're pages from her medical records showing liver function tests and thinking ability scores from right before she left the mansion, and then again 6 months later. The difference is huge, with all her numbers improving after she got away from Delilah's care. Her doctor wrote notes in the margins about how her symptoms matched chronic low-level poisoning, but he couldn't figure out the source since she'd already moved to Oregon by the time he saw the pattern. I save all the photos to my evidence folder and text Grace back thanking her for sending them. These records prove everything Grace told me about getting better once she escaped, and they show a clear medical pattern that supports my theory that the curse is actually murder. I add them to my growing file of documentation that includes photos of Delilah's medical supplies, the insurance policies, the hidden camera footage, and now soon the lab results from the drink samples. That night, I check the hidden camera feed from my apartment and watch footage of Delilah entering Mom's room around 8 in the evening. She sits down on the edge of Mom's bed and picks up the notebook where Mom has been writing her farewell letter, the one Delilah suggested she start working on weeks ago. I turn up the volume on my laptop and hear Delilah reading through what Mom has written so far, then suggesting specific phrases Mom should include. She tells Mom to write about being grateful for Delilah's guidance and to say she accepts her fate peacefully, actually dictating the exact words that will make Mom's death look expected and natural. Mom's voice is weak and confused as she agrees to add the phrases Delilah wants, and I watch her pick up her pen with shaking hands to write what Delilah is telling her to say. The whole thing makes me feel sick because Delilah is literally scripting the goodbye letter that will be used as evidence that Mom died willingly and without suspicion. I save the video file to 3 different locations knowing this footage shows the psychological control Delilah has over Mom, which is almost as bad as the physical poisoning because it's destroying Mom's ability to fight back or ask for help. My phone rings the next afternoon and it's the woman from Adult Protective Services calling me back about the report I filed. She apologizes for the delay and says she's scheduled a home visit to evaluate Mom's situation, and I feel a quick moment of hope until she tells me the appointment is for next Tuesday. I do the math in my head and realize next Tuesday is 3 days after Mom's 50th birthday, which means it will be too late if Delilah follows her usual pattern. I try to explain the urgency and tell her about the birthday deadline, but she says she understands my concern and she'll try to move the visit up if there's a cancellation. She can't promise anything though because they have a huge caseload and they need to coordinate with other agencies before they can do an emergency intervention. I thank her for trying and hang up feeling like I'm screaming into a void, while everyone around me moves at the speed of paperwork and procedures. The system isn't designed to prevent murders that look like natural deaths, and by the time anyone official takes action, it will be too late to save Mom. Judith calls me 2 days later with preliminary results from the drink sample I brought to her lab. Her voice is careful and professional as she explains what they found, telling me the sample contained traces of medicines called benzodiazepines and other drugs that make people sleepy and confused. She says the amounts weren't high enough to kill someone right away, but would definitely cause drowsiness and mental fog over time if someone took them every day. The levels match exactly with Mom's symptoms of being tired all the time and having trouble thinking clearly. Judith explains she's running more detailed tests on the vials I brought in, but these initial findings already confirm that someone has been giving Mom drugs on purpose, using substances that wouldn't show up in a regular check after death. I thank her and ask her to rush the rest of the analysis, then I save her preliminary report to my evidence folder. This is scientific proof that Mom is being poisoned, not dying from some genetic curse, and it's exactly the kind of documentation I need to make people take this seriously. I go back to the mansion the next day to check on Mom and find Delilah waiting for me in the front hallway. She tells me Mom needs complete rest now and that my visits seem to make her upset and anxious. She says I can see Mom for a few minutes, but then I need to let her sleep because she's entering the final stage of her transition. I follow Delilah upstairs and notice Mallory standing in the hallway outside Mom's room looking uncomfortable. When Delilah goes into Mom's bathroom to get something, Mallory quietly asks me if I have concerns about the care plan they're following. Her voice is low and hesitant, like she's not sure she should be asking, but I can tell she's been thinking about our earlier conversation. I tell her I have serious concerns, and that I've been gathering evidence about what's really happening here. I watch her face carefully to see if she's going to help me, or report everything back to Delilah, and I see her glance toward the bathroom door before nodding slightly like she wants to hear more, but not right now. I'm lying in bed that night unable to sleep when I suddenly realize the hidden camera I installed is connected to the mansion's wireless internet network. That means if Delilah knows anything about technology, she could potentially find the camera's signal and access the footage I've been recording. I get dressed and drive back to the mansion even though it's almost midnight, parking down the street and walking up to the side entrance with my keys ready. The house is dark except for a few night lights in the hallways, and I make my way up to Mom's room as quietly as possible. I unplug the camera from the wall and use my phone to change its settings so it records directly to its memory card, instead of uploading anything to the internet. It's a small technical thing, but it could mean the difference between having evidence and having Delilah find the camera and destroy it before I can use the footage. I plug it back in and check that it's still recording properly. Then I leave the same way I came in and drive home, hoping Delilah didn't hear me moving around upstairs. My email alert goes off the next morning, and I see a message from Zachary Corbett with the subject line legal notice. I open it and find a formal letter warning me to stop harassing Delilah and threatening to sue me if I keep making accusations against her. The whole thing is written in complicated legal language about defamation and trespassing, clearly designed to scare me into backing off and leaving Delilah alone. I read through it twice and realize this means Delilah knows I'm actively working against her, even if she doesn't know exactly what evidence I've collected. I forward the email to the elder law attorney I talked to before and ask if this changes anything about my options for protecting Mom. He writes back within an hour saying it's a typical scare tactic that lawyers use to intimidate people, but that I should be careful about how I gather evidence going forward because Delilah is obviously preparing to fight back. I save his response and add Corbett's threatening letter to my evidence file, knowing it actually helps my case by showing Delilah is trying to silence anyone who questions what she's doing. My phone rings the next morning and I see Judith's number on the screen. She tells me the detailed analysis is complete and asks if I can come by the lab to go over the results in person, because there's a lot to explain. I drive over immediately, and she spreads out several pages of technical reports across her desk, pointing to highlighted sections as she walks me through what they found. The vials contain a mixture of benzodiazepines combined with other sedative drugs that work together to slow down breathing and heart function over time. She explains that someone taking these substances in gradually increasing doses would become drowsy and confused. Their body would get weaker, and eventually their respiratory system would just stop working while they slept. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. The combination is designed to look like natural death, especially in someone around 50, who might be assumed to have underlying health problems that finally caught up with them. Judith traces her finger down the dosage calculations and shows me how the amounts in Mom's recent samples match exactly what would be needed to kill someone within weeks if the doses kept increasing on schedule. I feel sick listening to the technical details, but I'm also relieved because this is real proof that can't be dismissed as family drama or paranoid accusations. I thank Judith and ask her to send me copies of everything. Then I sit in my car in the parking lot trying to decide what to do next. I pull up the police department website on my phone and find the non-emergency number, expecting to get shuffled around or told to file an online report. The dispatcher answers and I ask to speak with a detective about a potential serial murder case, trying to sound calm and rational instead of like someone making wild accusations about their grandmother. She puts me on hold for what feels like forever, then transfers me to a detective named Fletcher Ridley, who picks up and asks me to explain the situation. I tell him everything starting with the family curse and working through all the evidence I've gathered, the insurance policies, the medical supplies, Grace's escape and recovery, the lab results showing poison in Mom's drinks. He listens without interrupting, and I keep expecting him to cut me off or tell me this sounds crazy, but instead he asks specific questions about timeline and documentation. He wants to know exactly how many days until Mom's birthday, whether I have the original samples or just lab reports, if there's video evidence of Delilah administering the substances. I answer each question and realize he's actually taking this seriously, treating it like a real investigation instead of a family dispute. He asks if I can meet him this evening to go over all the evidence in person, and I agree immediately, giving him the address of a coffee shop near my apartment. Detective Ridley shows up right on time, and I spread out everything I've collected on the table between us. Photos of the medical supplies and dosage notebooks, screenshots of the insurance documents, printouts of the lab reports, the video footage from the hidden camera showing Delilah with syringes. He goes through each piece carefully, asking questions about how I obtained things and whether anyone else has copies. He's honest about the challenges we're facing with this case, pointing out that most of the deaths happened years or even decades ago, that Delilah is a respected member of the community who's never been in trouble, and that some of my evidence might have problems with how it was collected. But he also says that what I've shown him is enough to justify opening an investigation, and he explains that the strongest case will require catching Delilah actually giving Mom the poison, with clear documentation of Mom's condition immediately afterward. He wants video that shows Delilah administering substances, then shows Mom becoming impaired within minutes, with timestamps that prove the sequence of events. I tell him about the hidden camera I already installed, and he nods, saying that's good, but we need better angles and backup recordings in case Delilah finds and destroys the first camera. He gives me his direct cell number and tells me to call him immediately if I see Delilah preparing to give Mom anything, especially as we get closer to her birthday. The next morning, I go to an electronics store and spend 20 minutes looking at different hidden cameras before settling on a small clock that looks completely normal. The sales guy shows me how it works, and I test it right there in the store, checking that the video quality is clear and that I can access the feed through an app on my phone. I buy it and sit in my car syncing it to my phone, making sure the timestamp displays correctly because Detective Ridley emphasized how important that detail would be. The clock needs to show the exact real time, so there's no question about when events happen. No way for Delilah's lawyers to argue that footage was edited or manipulated. I practice positioning the clock at different angles and checking how the room looks through the camera lens, wanting to make sure I can capture both the bed where Mom sleeps and the area where Delilah prepares medications. The whole setup takes almost an hour, But I need to get this right because it might be the difference between building a case that holds up in court and having everything dismissed as unreliable evidence. I visit Mom that afternoon and she looks worse than I've ever seen her. Her skin has this pale gray tone, and when she moves, it's like she's pushing through thick water, every gesture slow and effortful. She's awake but barely, and when she sees me, she reaches for my hand and holds on tight. She whispers that she's scared to fall asleep because she's not sure she'll wake up, and I can see real fear in her eyes even through the fog of whatever drugs Delilah has been giving her. I promise her that I won't let anything happen, that I'm working on getting her out of here and somewhere safe. I have to fight to keep my voice steady and not start crying because seeing Mom like this makes me want to grab her and run right now. But I know that won't work if Delilah can just report her as a confused elderly person being kidnapped by an unstable family member. I stay with Mom for an hour, talking to her about random things and trying to keep her alert, and when I leave, I'm more determined than ever to stop Delilah before it's too late. I'm walking past Mom's door later that evening when I hear voices inside and recognize Mallory talking to Delilah. Mallory is asking about the medication dosages, saying that the amounts seem higher than what standard protocols would recommend, and that she hasn't seen any documentation from a prescribing physician. Delilah's voice gets sharp, and she tells Mallory that hospice care at home allows for flexibility in dosing, that the goal is comfort, not following bureaucratic paperwork requirements. She says Mallory should focus on making Mom comfortable rather than questioning the care plan that's been working for the family for generations. Mallory backs off and apologizes, but I can hear the doubt in her voice, and I wonder if she's starting to realize something is wrong with this whole situation. I wait until they leave the room before I go in to swap out the old hidden camera for the new clock, positioning it carefully on Mom's nightstand, where it has a perfect view of the bed and the medication tray. My email alert goes off the next morning and I see a message from Corbett with an attachment. I open it and find a scanned document showing a DNR order that Delilah has prepared for Mom, with signature lines and notary stamps already printed on the page. The email asks me to bring Mom downstairs tomorrow to sign it in front of witnesses, explaining that it's routine end-of-life planning to make sure Mom's wishes are documented. I read through the form and realize this is Delilah setting up legal cover for Mom's death, getting Mom to sign away her right to emergency medical treatment so that when she stops breathing, no one will try to save her. I forward the email immediately to Detective Ridley, and he calls me back within minutes, confirming that getting Mom to sign this document would make investigating her death much harder because there would be legal documentation saying she chose not to receive life-saving care. I spend the rest of the morning searching online for doctors who do capacity assessments, looking for someone who specializes in elder care and understands issues around undue influence. I find a doctor whose website mentions experience with cases involving family pressure and financial exploitation, and I call his office explaining that I need someone to evaluate whether my mom is in a mental state to make legal decisions. The receptionist asks some questions and then puts me through to the doctor himself, and I tell him about Mom's condition and my concerns that she's being kept drugged and confused. He agrees to visit the house tomorrow afternoon to conduct a private evaluation of Mom's mental state and her ability to understand what she's signing. I give him the mansion address and he says he'll need at least 30 minutes alone with Mom to do a proper assessment, and that if he finds evidence of impairment, he can provide documentation that might be enough to block the DNR signing. The doctor calls me back 2 hours later sounding frustrated. He says he drove to the mansion but security turned him away at the gate, that someone told him there's a flu outbreak in the house and no visitors are allowed for health reasons. He tried to explain that he's a physician coming for a scheduled appointment but they wouldn't let him through and he can't force his way onto private property. He says he can reschedule for next week if the situation changes, but that without cooperation from whoever controls access to the house, there's not much he can do. I thank him and hang up feeling like I just hit another wall, and I realize Delilah somehow found out about the appointment and actively blocked it. She's aware that I'm working against her now, even if she doesn't know exactly what evidence I've collected, and she's taking steps to prevent any outside professionals from seeing Mom or documenting her condition. Judith calls me that same afternoon and says she rushed the final analysis on the hair sample I brought her weeks ago. The results show that Mom has been exposed to the same sedative compounds over a period of at least 6 weeks, with levels that gradually increased over time. The pattern matches exactly what you'd expect if someone was building up doses slowly to establish tolerance before giving a final lethal amount. Judith explains that she's written up a preliminary report with careful language about chain of custody limitations since I collected the samples myself. But the scientific findings are clear and detailed enough that Detective Ridley says they'll support getting a warrant if we can capture one more piece of direct evidence showing Delilah actually administering the poison. I spent the next morning at a medical supply store looking for something that could help me track Mom's location if things went wrong. The clerk showed me a small GPS device made for elderly patients with memory problems, about the size of a quarter, and designed to fit in a pocket without being noticed. I bought it along with a sewing kit and tested the alerts on my phone in the parking lot, setting up a notification system that would ping me if Mom left the mansion property or if the device moved more than a mile from the house. Back at my apartment, I carefully sewed the tracker into the inner pocket of Mom's bathrobe, the one she wore every morning, making sure the stitching was invisible and the device sat flat against the fabric. It felt paranoid to be tracking my own mother like she was a flight risk. But Delilah controlled every aspect of access to the house, and I needed some way to know where Mom was if Delilah tried to move her, or if something happened that I didn't know about. I tested the geofence one more time before heading to the mansion, watching my phone light up with an alert as I drove past the property boundary. The clock camera I'd hidden on Mom's nightstand had been recording for 2 days straight, and I checked the footage every few hours from my phone, fast-forwarding through the boring parts where Mom slept, or Delilah sat reading. Then, at exactly 11 in the morning, I watched Delilah enter the room with a small syringe in her hand, clearly visible in the frame as she approached Mom's IV line. She injected something into the port, and I could see the exact moment on the timestamp. Then Mom's eyes got heavy within minutes, and her words became slow and confused as Delilah asked her questions about the farewell letter. The footage was perfect. Delilah's face was clear, the syringe was obvious, and Mom's declining state was documented with timestamps that matched up exactly. I called Detective Ridley immediately while saving 3 backup copies of the video file, and he watched it remotely through a secure link I sent him. He confirmed this was exactly the direct evidence he needed to move forward with getting a warrant, that seeing Delilah actually administering something to Mom while Mom was clearly impaired afterward would be enough for a judge to take seriously. Detective Ridley called me back an hour later with specific instructions about what to do next. He explained that the warrant process would take at least another day or two, even with the video evidence, and that in the meantime I should call 911 the next time I saw Delilah preparing to give Mom any medications or injections. Having paramedics document Mom's condition and the presence of substances in her system in real time would create an official medical record that couldn't be dismissed as family drama or disputed later in court. He walked me through exactly what to say to the dispatcher and how to make sure the paramedics understood this was a suspected poisoning case, not just a family disagreement about end-of-life care. I programmed 911 into my phone's emergency shortcut and spent the afternoon packing a bag with Mom's essentials in case we needed to leave the mansion quickly. I grabbed her medications, copies of her medical records, comfortable clothes, and her favorite photos, storing everything in my car trunk where it would be ready to go at a moment's notice. I arrived at the mansion that evening to find Delilah in Mom's room with Corbett sitting at the small desk, the DNR paperwork spread out in front of them. Mom was propped up in bed looking pale and confused, and Delilah was pointing to signature lines while Corbett prepared his notary stamp. I walked in with my phone already recording video and interrupted them, saying clearly that Mom wasn't in any state to make legal decisions and that I was documenting everything happening in this room. Delilah's face went cold and she told me to leave immediately, that this was none of my business and I was upsetting Mom during an important moment. But Corbett looked uncomfortable as he glanced at Mom's glazed expression and the way her hand shook when she tried to hold the pen. He suggested they reschedule the signing for a time when there was less family conflict, using careful lawyer language that gave him an out without directly accusing anyone of anything wrong. It was a small win, but I'd take it. Anything that delayed Mom signing away her right to emergency medical treatment bought us more time. Mallory found me in the hallway the next morning and pulled me into an empty room, closing the door before speaking in a low voice. She admitted she'd been reviewing the medication logs overnight, and something didn't add up about the dosages or the combinations Delilah had been giving Mom. The amounts were too high for standard comfort care. The drug combinations were unusual and potentially dangerous, and there was no proper prescription documentation from any actual doctor. She said she could lose her nursing license for participating in this even unknowingly, and that she was seriously considering reporting it to the state medical board. I told her about Detective Ridley and the investigation that was already underway, showing her some of the evidence I'd gathered, including the video of Delilah with the syringe. Mallory's face went pale as she watched the footage, and she agreed to keep Mom as alert as possible going forward, to water down any drinks Delilah prepared, and to call me immediately if Delilah tried to give any additional medications or injections. I photographed the new vials that arrived at the house later that day, delivered by a medical supply courier and signed for by Delilah. The lot numbers and pharmaceutical labels indicated these were stronger concentrations of the same sedative compounds Judith had found in the earlier samples. I watched Delilah show them to Mallory and explain this was the final comfort batch for Mom's last days, speaking about it like it was normal hospice care rather than murder supplies being delivered to kill her own daughter. The casual way she discussed it while I stood right there in the room made my skin crawl, but I focused on getting clear photos of every vial and documenting the labels and dosage information for Detective Ridley. Grace called me that afternoon to say she'd booked a flight and would arrive tomorrow, ready to help physically move Mom if we could create an opportunity to get her out of the mansion. Having another family member who understood what was really happening felt like reinforcement arriving, and Grace knew the mansion layout well enough from her own time living there to help plan an actual extraction if it came to that. We spent an hour on the phone talking through different scenarios. What if Delilah called the police and accused us of kidnapping? What if Mom refused to leave because she was too scared of the curse? What if we got Mom out but then faced legal charges for interference or elder abuse ourselves? We didn't have perfect answers, but at least we were thinking through the possibilities and making backup plans for each situation. Corbett's office sent me another cease and desist letter by email that evening, this time threatening to sue me personally for defamation and interference with estate administration. The letter demanded I stop making accusations against Delilah, stop disrupting Mom's end-of-life care, and stop harassing family members, with language carefully designed to make me sound like an unstable person causing problems rather than someone trying to prevent a murder. I forwarded the whole thing to Detective Ridley, who responded that it actually helped our case by showing Delilah was actively trying to silence me, but the legal threat still made me nervous about potential consequences. I filed for a temporary restraining order against Delilah the next morning, attaching the video evidence and lab reports to the court petition, along with a written statement detailing everything I'd discovered. The filing requested that Delilah be barred from administering any medications to Mom and from preventing Mom's contact with other family members, framing it as emergency protection from immediate harm. It was a long shot given that Delilah was Mom's primary caregiver, and we were all living in her house. But the elder law attorney I'd consulted helped me present it as a clear danger situation that required immediate court intervention. The court clerk called me back within hours to say a judge had reviewed the petition and was granting a brief hearing for tomorrow morning. She explained the judge would look at the evidence more carefully and hear from both sides before deciding whether to issue even a temporary order, but that the video footage and toxicology reports were compelling enough to warrant an emergency hearing. I spent that evening organizing my evidence into a clear timeline, printing out key documents and photos and preparing what I would say to explain the situation without sounding hysterical or making accusations I couldn't back up with proof. Mom's birthday was in 3 days, and this hearing felt like our last real chance to get legal protection in place before Delilah made her final move. That night, my phone lit up with a text from Mallory at 10:15, and when I opened it, my hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. The message said Delilah was preparing a final comfort dose for Mom tonight, the night before her 50th birthday, to help her sleep peacefully through her last day. Attached was a photo of a syringe filled with clear liquid sitting on a silver tray next to 3 small vials, all of it laid out like surgical instruments ready for use. Mallory's text continued that she couldn't be part of this anymore, that this crossed every line and that she was going to try to delay Delilah as long as possible. I called Detective Ridley immediately, and he answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. I told him about Mallory's text and sent him the photo, and he was quiet for a moment before speaking. He said to call 911 the exact moment Delilah entered Mom's room with that syringe, that we needed paramedics there to document everything in real time, that catching her in the act with witnesses and immediate medical evaluation was our best shot. An email from Judith arrived 20 minutes later with the subject line marked urgent, and when I opened it, I found a formal written report attached as a PDF. The document was 12 pages long with technical language and charts, carefully noting the chain of custody limitations, but detailing exactly what substances were found in each sample I'd provided. The report explained how the combination of drugs would cause progressive sedation and respiratory depression, building up in the system over weeks until a final larger dose would stop breathing entirely. It noted that death would appear completely natural without specific toxicology testing, looking for these exact compounds, and that the dosing pattern suggested deliberate escalation toward a lethal endpoint. The scientific language was dense but clear, the kind of document that carried weight in court proceedings, and I added it to my evidence file knowing this might be the foundation that made everything else credible. I started packing a bag for Mom at midnight, pulling clothes from her closet during my last visit and adding items I thought she'd need. I packed comfortable clothes, her medications for blood pressure and thyroid that were actually prescribed by real doctors, and copies of all her medical records I'd been able to access or photograph. I loaded my car with this bag plus my own overnight things, a folder of printed evidence, my laptop and phone chargers. I mapped the route to the nearest hospital on my phone and saved the address of a motel 2 towns over where we could stay safely if we needed to hide. Grace and I texted back and forth confirming meeting points and backup plans, treating this like a military operation because that's exactly what it felt like. We were extracting someone from immediate danger with limited time and an adversary who controlled the terrain and every detail mattered. Grace's flight landed at 3 in the afternoon the next day, and instead of coming directly to the mansion, she took an Uber to a coffee shop about 2 miles away. I met her there, and we sat in a back corner booth going over the plan one more time, speaking quietly, even though no one was paying attention to us. I would return to the mansion and position myself in a downstairs room where I could watch the hidden camera feeds on my phone, staying out of sight but ready to move fast. Grace would wait in her rental car parked on a side street near the mansion's back gate, ready to help move Mom once the paramedics arrived and the situation was secured. The moment Delilah tried to administer that final dose, I would call 911 and run upstairs, and Grace would come in through the back entrance that she still had keys for from years ago. It sounded simple when we laid it out like that, but we both knew how quickly things could go wrong, how many variables were outside our control. I drove back to the mansion at 6 and let myself in through the front door, telling Delilah I wanted to spend the evening nearby in case Mom needed anything. She seemed pleased by this, probably thinking I'd finally accepted the inevitable, and she told me Mom was resting comfortably in preparation for tomorrow. I positioned myself in a small sitting room on the second floor with a clear view of the staircase, my phone open to the camera app and 911 ready to dial. The hours crawled by with nothing happening, just me watching the small screen showing Mom's room and checking the time every few minutes. At 9 p.m. exactly, the camera showed Delilah entering Mom's room carrying a small tray, and I could see the syringe clearly even on my phone's screen. I dialed 911 while already moving toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time as quietly as I could manage. The dispatcher answered, and I was reporting an attempted poisoning at our address, giving the specific room location, while I could hear Delilah's voice through the door telling Mom this would help her rest through the night. I burst into the room just as Delilah was reaching toward Mom's IV line with the syringe in her hand, and she froze completely when she saw me. Her face showed shock first, then her expression shifted to something cold and calculated as she realized what was happening, that I'd been watching and waiting for exactly this moment. I positioned myself between Delilah and Mom's bed, holding my phone up to record everything while the 911 dispatcher was still on the line asking questions. Delilah started backing toward the door while saying this was all a misunderstanding, that I was hysterical and didn't understand end-of-life care, that Mom had consented to comfort measures. Grace appeared in the doorway right then, slightly out of breath from running in through the back entrance, and her presence seemed to shake Delilah's composure even more. Mallory came running up the stairs from the first floor where she'd been waiting, and when she saw the syringe still in Delilah's hand and Mom's drowsy, confused state, she moved to the medication tray and gathered up all the vials. Mallory said these needed to be tested and documented properly, that she was securing them as evidence, and she held the vials against her chest like she was protecting something precious. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes according to the timestamp on my phone recording, their radios crackling as they came up the stairs with equipment bags. Mallory handed over the vials immediately and started explaining Mom's symptoms and the medication schedule she'd been documenting, her voice professional despite obvious stress. She detailed the doses and timing and substances, noting that nothing matched standard hospice protocols and that there were no proper prescriptions. The paramedics assessed Mom and checked her vital signs, noting her altered mental state and the concerning medication history Mallory described. They determined she needed immediate hospital evaluation given the substances involved and her condition, and they started preparing her for transport. Mom was confused and kept asking what was happening, and I held her hand while they loaded her onto the stretcher, telling her she was going somewhere safe. I climbed into the ambulance with Mom while Grace stayed behind at the mansion, her job now to make sure Delilah didn't destroy any evidence and to let Detective Ridley into the house when he arrived. Detective Ridley met us at the hospital emergency entrance 40 minutes later, and I watched through the ambulance bay doors as he took possession of the vials and syringes that Mallory had secured. He photographed everything with his phone and a professional camera, documenting the chain of custody and labeling each item carefully. He told me he was heading back to the mansion to question Delilah, but that he wasn't arresting her yet, that he wanted to wait for the hospital toxicology results and to execute a proper search warrant with everything documented correctly. I asked if she could just leave, and he said he'd made it very clear she was under investigation and shouldn't leave town, that trying to flee would only make things worse for her. The emergency room staff moved fast once we were inside, taking Mom to a treatment bay and starting blood draws immediately. They ran a full toxicology screen that would test for everything, not just common drugs, but the specific sedatives and compounds that Judith's report had identified. The ER doctor examined Mom and documented her confused state, her vital signs that showed respiratory depression, and the concerning medication history that Mallory had provided. She ordered intravenous fluids and monitoring, creating an official medical record that supported everything I'd been claiming for weeks. The test results came back 2 hours later, showing multiple sedatives in Mom's system at levels that were way too high for any legitimate medical treatment, exactly matching the substances from Judith's report. Mom was admitted for observation and treatment, moved to a regular hospital room with monitoring equipment and nurses checking on her every hour. For the first time in weeks, she was in a place where Delilah couldn't access her, where every medication was prescribed by real doctors and documented in official records. The restraining order hearing happened by video call from the hospital the next morning, with me appearing on a laptop the social worker brought to Mom's room. I presented all the evidence I'd gathered over the past weeks, playing the video clips and sharing the lab reports and hospital documentation. The judge reviewed everything carefully, asking questions about the timeline and the medical findings, clearly taking the situation seriously. She granted a temporary order barring Delilah from any contact with Mom and from entering the hospital or coming within 500 feet of Mom's room, the legal protection we desperately needed. It wasn't a criminal conviction, but it was official court recognition that Mom was in danger, and I could see the relief on Mom's face even through her continued confusion from the drugs still clearing her system. The next morning, Corbett's office called Detective Ridley and said they were withdrawing from representing Delilah. The paralegal who called explained that Corbett's firm takes elder abuse very seriously, and they had no knowledge of any criminal activity. She said they would provide copies of all estate documents and insurance policies to help with the investigation. Detective Ridley called me right after to say this was a big break because now he could access decades of financial records without fighting legal battles. He explained that Corbett was probably trying to protect himself and his firm from being connected to Delilah's crimes. The cooperation meant Ridley could trace every insurance payout and show the full pattern of how Delilah had been collecting money after each family death. I felt relieved that at least one person who had been helping Delilah was now backing away and giving us what we needed. 2 days later, Adult Protective Services finally showed up to do their investigation. The investigator was a woman in her 50s who interviewed me first, then Grace, then Mallory, and finally the hospital staff who had been treating Mom. She took detailed notes and reviewed all the evidence I had gathered over the past weeks. She looked through the photos of the medical supplies, the lab reports, the hospital documentation, and the videos from the hidden cameras. After spending most of the day collecting information, she told me she was opening a formal case. She said the pattern of deaths in the family combined with the financial benefit Delilah received from each one was extremely concerning. She explained that APS would work with law enforcement to investigate whether other family members who died might have been victims of the same scheme. The investigator was professional and thorough, but I could see the shock on her face when she realized how many people had died and how long this had been going on. The same afternoon, Mallory met with Detective Ridley at the police station to give a written statement. She brought all the medication logs she had kept during her time working for Delilah. The statement detailed every unusual dosing instruction and every time Delilah had pressured her to keep quiet about problems with the documentation. Mallory admitted in the statement that she should have reported her concerns earlier, but that Delilah was scary to work for and she needed the job. She explained how the medication combinations were wrong and how the amounts were way too high for legitimate comfort care. Her statement matched everything I had been saying and added professional medical context that made the case much stronger. Ridley told me later that having a healthcare worker confirm the medication problems was huge for building the case. I knew that coming forward might cost Mallory her nursing career, but she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. 3 days after Mom's birthday, Judith called with her final complete toxicology report. The report listed every substance found in all the samples I had collected and explained exactly how they worked together. She described how the specific combination would slowly stop someone from breathing normally and make their heart work less and less over time. The report said this particular mix of drugs would cause death that looked completely natural, unless someone specifically tested for these exact substances. It explained how someone would just seem to fall asleep and not wake up, which was exactly what had happened to every family member at 50. Judith had included scientific references and medical studies to back up her findings. Detective Ridley called me after receiving the report and said this was the scientific proof that turned family accusations into documented evidence of an actual murder method. He said the prosecutor now had everything needed to show that Delilah had been using a specific technique to kill people while making it look like natural death. The search warrant was executed on the mansion 3 days after Mom turned 50. Detective Ridley showed up early in the morning with a team of people from the police department and the crime lab. They had a judge's order to search the entire house and collect any evidence related to the deaths. I watched from my car parked down the street as they carried out boxes and boxes of stuff. They photographed everything in place before moving it. They took all the medical supplies from the transition suite and Mom's room. They collected the notebooks with dosage schedules that went back years and years. They found the medical textbooks with highlighted parts about poisons that don't show up in normal tests. They took files on every family member who had died with notes about their health and medication schedules. They even collected all the farewell letters that Delilah had kept like trophies. The search took most of the day, and by the time they were done, they had filled a police van with evidence. Delilah was arrested right there at the mansion and charged with attempted murder for what she tried to do to Mom. The detective told me the prosecutor was already looking at additional charges as they investigated all the historical deaths. Watching Delilah get put in handcuffs and taken away felt unreal after weeks of her being in complete control of everything. 2 days later, Delilah made bail. She used money from the estate to post bond and hired a whole team of expensive criminal defense lawyers. The local news picked up the story, but they only had basic information about an investigation into suspicious deaths in a prominent family. Extended family members I barely knew started calling and texting to ask what was happening. Some of them insisted Delilah would never hurt anyone and said I was making things up because I wanted Mom's inheritance. Others admitted they had always thought the curse story was weird and that something felt wrong about how everyone died. The family split into 2 groups, arguing on social media and in phone calls and text messages. People who believed Delilah was innocent started attacking me online and saying I was an ungrateful granddaughter trying to destroy a respected woman. People who believed me shared their own suspicions about family deaths they had witnessed. What should have been a clear case of justice turned into messy family drama playing out where everyone could see it. I stopped reading the messages and comments because they were making everything worse. Over the next week, Mom's condition got better as the drugs finally cleared out of her system. The hospital set her up with a doctor who works with older people who have been manipulated and abused. The psychiatrist spent hours talking with Mom about what Delilah had done to her over the past year. She explained that Mom had been given drugs that messed up her thinking and made it impossible for her to understand what was really happening. The psychiatrist said Delilah had used a mix of chemicals that affected Mom's brain and psychological pressure that made fighting back feel impossible. Mom cried when she realized how close she came to dying, and how completely Delilah had controlled what she thought and felt. She kept saying she couldn't believe her own mother had been planning to kill her for money. I sat with Mom through the worst moments when the grief and anger hit her hardest. The psychiatrist said it would take a long time for Mom to process everything, but that she was strong and would recover. The hospital social worker met with us to plan for Mom leaving the hospital. She made it very clear that Mom could not go back to the mansion while Delilah had any access to it. We talked about different options for where Mom could stay and how to keep her safe long term. The social worker brought up the possibility of selling Mom's share of the estate to pay for her own place to live. Grace offered to let Mom come stay with her in Oregon, where she would be far away from Delilah and all the family drama. But Mom said she wanted to stay near me because I was the one who had saved her life, and she trusted me to keep her safe. We started looking at rental houses in town that had good security systems and no connection to Delilah or the family. The social worker helped us make a safety plan that included keeping the GPS tracker active and having regular check-ins with people who knew the situation. She also connected us with resources for victims of elder abuse and gave us information about support groups. Right in the middle of planning everything, Corbett sent an email saying the estate accounts were being frozen. The prosecutor was going after the money because it came from insurance fraud. This meant Mom couldn't access her inheritance to pay for a place to live or her medical bills. All the money that should have been hers was locked up in the legal case. We suddenly had no way to pay for anything. I maxed out my credit cards to cover the first month's rent on a small house we found and to pay the medical bills that insurance didn't cover. The house was tiny compared to the mansion, but it had good locks and a security system and was in a neighborhood where nobody knew our family. I knew we would figure out the money problems later, but right now keeping Mom safe had to come first. Grace sent some money to help and said she would keep helping as long as we needed it. The financial stress added another layer of worry on top of everything else we were dealing with. I started seeing a therapist to deal with everything that had happened over the past month. The fear of losing Mom, the investigation, watching Delilah every second, and realizing how close everything came to going wrong. The therapist helped me understand that being constantly alert and worried had been necessary to keep Mom alive, but that I needed to learn when it was okay to relax now. She said I was showing signs of trauma from the sustained stress and danger. We worked on ways to set limits and recognized that I couldn't control everything, even though I wanted to protect Mom from any possible threat. The therapist taught me breathing exercises for when the panic hit, and ways to tell the difference between real danger and my brain being stuck in high alert mode. I practiced noticing when I was being reasonably careful, versus when I was being so worried that it was making things harder. She reminded me that Mom was safe now, and that I had done everything right to save her, but that I also needed to take care of myself so I could keep helping Mom through her recovery. We found a small rental house 3 weeks after Mom left the hospital, and I spent 2 days installing deadbolts on every door and window locks that actually worked. The security company came out and set up cameras covering all the entrances, and I tested the GPS tracker in Mom's phone to make sure the geofence alerts were working properly. Grace flew in to help us move Mom's stuff from storage, and we set up her bedroom on the first floor so she wouldn't have to climb stairs while she was still getting her strength back. Mom was shaky those first few days, jumping at every sound and checking the locks multiple times before bed, but I noticed her hands were steadier when she made coffee in the mornings, and she started asking about going back to her book club. Grace came to visit every 3 weeks, and we set up a group chat where we checked in every morning with a simple thumbs-up emoji, just to confirm everyone was okay. The prosecutor called twice to update us on the case against Delilah, and said they were building charges related to multiple deaths, but that it would take months to go through all the evidence. 2 months after Mom's 50th birthday, we sat together at the kitchen table in our safe little house eating takeout, and Mom reached across to squeeze my hand. She said she was ready to actually start living now instead of just surviving. And I believed her because I could see the color back in her face, and the way she smiled when she talked about maybe getting a dog or taking a painting class. The curse that had hung over our family for decades turned out to be one woman's greed, and we were both alive and free from it. Well, there's the big finale nobody was waiting for. If you're still watching, I can't tell if you're loyal or just bored. Either way, I'm flattered. Go on, subscribe and see how far this bad habit goes.